Welcome. I'm Dr. Lisa. Thank you for joining me. I'm so excited to offer this version of Inputs to Action. So I'm delighted to welcome a guest, Peggy Ho. Peggy is the General Counsel of Commonwealth Financial. And Peggy and I go back a minute. And so I'm excited, Peggy, for us to actually gather and have some real conversation about some real things that are going on here in our world. So thank you for joining me.
I am excited. It is great to be here, and I am honored to be asked, and it's a privilege.
Well, I appreciate it because you and I, we've had a chance to do and partner around diversity work. You've been a huge champion and just a believer, and not just a believer but a doer.
We've done some stuff.
Yes,
we've gotten into some good trouble.
Indeed, right? Indeed, we have, as dear John Lewis would say. So, yes, I know, like, you've influenced some law firms. You've changed you've done some work there. So, but I'm interested today. We want to really focus in on this whole environment of Asian hate and how that's being experienced. And again, just interested to get a perspective, right? Because it continues to show itself. We saw earlier in the month, Stephen A. Smith ran into some challenges around his understanding, and I think he stepped in and owned that. But before we get into all of that, let's have the audience get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about you. Tell us about your family.
Sure. So I'm a daughter of immigrants. My parents came to this country from Taiwan, and Taiwan at the time when they left, it was a dictatorial regime, and folks who know about the history there, it's quite fraught. The battles, or whether or not it's part of China or not part of China. I'm telling you, it's not. Taiwan is its own country, but back in the 60s, it was ruled by a dictatorship, and my parents came to the United States really to pursue their education and look for a better life and build a better life for their families. And so I grew up in the Northeast. I grew up in Massachusetts. I have one brother, and today I am still in Massachusetts. I haven't moved very far in life, and I live here with my husband and two boys.
Yeah,
12 and 14. So it's good.
It is good. It's good. And so you sort of in your, I'm going to say, staying rooted in Massachusetts there for a moment, spent your undergraduate years at Harvard University.
Yes.
I know you want to say something like Go Crimson or something. I don't know what you want to say, something like that.
Yeah, I don't think we do that, no.
And then you did make your way out of Boston for a minute and got down to DC for Georgetown Law. So we appreciate you coming to DC for a minute.
DC is a blast. Yeah, no, and I was at Georgetown for law school, and also for I got a degree in foreign service. So I was a joint degree candidate at Georgetown, and had thought that I was going to become a diplomat and wanted to become the first female Secretary of State, but Madeleine Albright did it first.
Yeah, pesky. But go Madeleine. But you were on a good path, and you've ended you're now in a really good place as the General Counsel. So as you sort of think back about your experience, were there people that you looked to? Were there role models for you as you were coming through that you kind of anchored in?
I think I always, when you're young, and you're, young meaning, before you even get to college and all that, I obviously, I think many people do, they look up to their parents and friends of their parents who are, have achieved success, and, you are inspired by them. And especially my parents, having, sacrificed so much to come to a new country and not to have the language and to be able to navigate in that way, it continues to inspire me to this day. And I think many immigrant children are constantly trying to strive because they don't want to let their parents down, you know, and so there's always that. But I think what you might be getting at is, you know, once you begin your career, and who do you look up to, and who is mentoring you, and who is setting up that vision for you? Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you know, I don't know if I ever had a person who kind of encapsulated that vision, because, you know, I was looking for women who had achieved success, and I started my career in a law firm.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I remember being a junior associate in a law firm, and kind of looking up there, and you know, you don't see, at the time, you didn't see many women partners, and the ones that I did see were those who either they weren't married, or their husbands were at home, or they didn't have children, and it just wasn't quite the vision of the life that I wanted to lead. And then if you're trying to find Asian women folks up there, you know, it really wasn't there, right? You know, it was hard to see. I mean, there might have been one Asian woman partner, but, and then even, you know, looking just a few years ahead, I remember, you know, there were some Asian women associates who were ahead of me, and that I really did look up to. And I thought of them as just, gosh, you know, if I could just, you know, aspire to be like them. And one by one, they would leave the firm before that partnership level. And that's kind of one big reason why, you know, I focus a lot when I'm working with outside counsel, these outside law firms. You know, how are they cultivating talent, and how are they retaining great talent? Because why is it that, you know, that people of color are leaving? Right. You know, because I think the law firms would say women are coming, they're joining, and you know, they do have Asian attorneys and Latinas and Black attorneys joining, but they don't make it. And why? And you know, we could talk for hours and hours about that. But yeah, to answer your question, you know, I think it was hard to find somebody who looked like me that I could emulate. And so you end up, you know, I've had great mentors, and so I don't want people to think that I didn't have anybody helping me, and I didn't find people to lean on and to go to for advice. It's just, you know, they generally happen to be men, and a couple of women, but not women that looked like me, and not women who had families like me. It's very interesting.
That is interesting. It is interesting. Well, I asked the question in exactly the way in which you described it, because it is about representation, and I think you don't really appreciate the dearth of representation until there starts to be some, and then you think, oh, you know what I mean, like what that could have meant for me, and or now I see and appreciate what was missing. Because when it's not there, you just kind of find a way to keep, you know, you keep going, you keep fighting through.
You do what you got to do, right?
You do what you got to do. But yeah, so your call out there, and it does really explain, I think, the good trouble that you've taken around influencing outside counsel to think about that pipeline, and to talk about that, particularly in corporate settings. So, you know, I can't say enough how much I appreciate that. And what's so interesting, and I'll say this point, and I'm going to ask you another question, but when you think about the law, and with people graduating from law school and then taking the bar, it doesn't actually get more even than that. Everybody has taken the same courses. Everybody has passed the same test. And yet there's this drop off. And so you ask the question, well, why? Why is there that drop off?
Why is that? Why is it? And frankly, you know, to be honest, it's not, you know, we're talking about the law firm construct, but, you know, you look in corporations, I mean, frankly, you look everywhere, right? And those same issues perpetuate. I mean, you know, all of the, you know, we were at the same company, but even the companies that we're at now, I'm sure if you look at them, they're probably doing a pretty good job entry level, junior levels, but something happens. Something happens when you get to the higher levels. And, I don't think this is going to shock anybody, but, I go to meetings today and, I'm the only woman.
Yeah.
There's no other color on the screen, on the Zoom screen. And, that it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah. Opportunity, but you've kicked the door in. So I'm anticipating that it'll start to change as time moves on.
Well, it takes a village. You've done some kicking yourself, so
I have. I got a little bruised toe, but we're gonna keep kicking. so, so let me ask you this, because I did want to go into this conversation around the rise of Asian hate, and we just acknowledged that the former administration said many things that were that sort of, I think, spurred this on. They were very hurtful, very, very challenging, and really sort of created this environment, particularly in the Asian community, that has just created this aggressive, horrible kind of behavior. And so it's just been aggressive, and people are physically attacking Asians randomly.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious as to what your experience has been. I've heard more about what it looks like in California. How does it look in Boston?
Yeah, well, I will say personally, I have not, I can't say that I've experienced, I haven't been beaten up or attacked or anything like that. I and my husband have had, situations where you're walking down the street and somebody calls out something, right? And I tend to be the type of person where, I'm like, well, what did that person just say? Is that what they said? Maybe that's not what they said. And I usually just try to move on. But things like that will happen. I will say also that, over the past few years, I live in Massachusetts, right? It's a progressive place, and we hope that it's safe and people are respectful and all of that. That being said, my family, we decided to go out to towards Western Massachusetts, where, it gets a little more conservative, and we're driving around and we see lots of signs for the former president. And, I just remember thinking, gosh, might not be a good idea to get out of the car here. Might want to be a little more careful. And that just, it makes you sad that you have to think that way. And, if you're a white person, you don't generally think that way. And I think so it is this extra burden that we all feel. And I'll tell one more story about my town, which I just found shocking. And this was back in 2016. Again, I live in an affluent town in Massachusetts. You don't expect these things to happen. But an Asian American attorney who happened to be a former managing partner of a nationwide international law firm, in fact. So this is a big deal. He was at the gas station, putting gas in his car in our town, and was basically accosted by someone and said, go back home, go back to your own country. And, if that, and that actually made the press up here, it was so shocking. And if that can happen here, it is very sad. And, but the thing is, I think it also is important to know that this isn't new. The fact that, there is this type of behavior, and the fact that Asian Americans have been getting attacked, this has been happening for years. And I think people don't know about it because we don't teach the history.
Right.
And that, I'm sure you saw in the news recently that I think it was Illinois that kind of said that they're going to teach Asian American history. I'm embarrassed to say that I don't know a ton about Asian American history, and I've actually gone out to get some books so I can, educate myself. I know some facts. I mean, but this has been happening, and I think it becomes it gets very complicated, right? I think Asian Americans, another reason why people don't know about it is, as a general statement, we tend not to speak up and we tend not to stand up, and we are taught to keep our heads down and do good work and don't cause trouble, and that's how you succeed. And that's culturally what a lot of us grew up with, and I think in many ways to our detriment, right? Because I think subconsciously people think that you can push us around and we're not going to do anything.
Right.
And that translates into so many ways, right? If you then come back to corporate America and you think about just things like promotion or merit increase or anything like that, people, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And there are, oh, well, she's never going to complain. I don't need to give her a big raise, or she's not going to complain that she wasn't promoted. She's just going to keep doing her good work. And year after year after year of that,
Right.
and you see what happens, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, you make so many good points. I mean, I think the lack of we have some, I'm going to say, some embarrassment, a little shame that we don't know more, and yet it's not a part of the system.
Mm-hmm.
You have to go out of your way
Mm-hmm.
to study the history and to have that at your fingertips and appreciate the fact. And your point is right, that this is not new.
Right.
But I think what is new, and you alluded to this as well, is that now we're starting to talk about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the piece that was new, we had never heard that stoked at the top before. That was different,
yes.
right? In terms of our current experience.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there is a new energy in the community to say, you know what, we're going to start speaking out here. And I know I've seen that at our firm during. It was one point where our ERG held what they call the Care and Connection session. Mm-hmm. It was really just about holding space for our Asian colleagues to take a moment, talk, share their experiences, express their emotion. Was very powerful. Yeah. And as people talk, they said, we've been sort of the model minority, and we've been silent as to not rock that boat into that space. But we're going to set that down, and we're going to start talking. And it was just very moving to hear that and to see them sort of say, we're, this it's a new day.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. You talk about model minority, and that's something that, and actually, going back to the tensions being stoked by the top. And I was agreeing with you that it was new. It was definitely new in this way because it was so flagrant and so horrible. Right. But frankly, if you go back into history, you think about Japanese internment, you think about that type of stuff, the Chinese Exclusion Act, and even the creation of the model minority. Right? Because it's not like the Asians created that. That was kind of placed upon us, right? Because, and honestly, for the purpose of pitting us against you, right? I mean,
absolutely, all day, right? All day.
And growing up, I had, you don't realize that, right? And so you're told, oh, you're the model minority, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, well, that sounds good. I'm supposed to be the model, okay, and I'm supposed to be good at all these things, and you have no idea that you're basically being used, right? And then it just creates all of these weird expectations where people are kind of like, well, you're Asian, you're supposed to be good at all this stuff, and you're supposed to be, quiet, and you're supposed to be submissive. You're the model. Right. And yeah, so it's
Mhm.
It's
Social
interesting.
oppression at its best because it does exactly what you describe. It keeps us apart. It has us missing each other, and how we, because our power really is in our collection, right? I mean, if we can sit down and not get into what my friend Dr. Lino calls the pain Olympics. If we cannot be in the pain Olympics and
Right.
just say, you know what, the history in which we emerge from is different, but the pain of
Mhm.
it is not really different. And if we can collectively come together, we start to really change stuff.
Totally.
So I'm appreciating your point there. That's exactly right. It hasn't been seen. It was thrust upon you, and so then there you have it. And then other groups are looking at you, going, "Well, they're the model. Why are they you know what I mean?" And so therein lies the separation.
Exactly. It's making different groups the other, right? And it's kind of, and I think that's, I mean, I think for all folks of color, we've been made to feel like the other in different ways. I think for Asian Americans, I think it's um, particularly, I think because of language, because the generalization that, oh, you know, Asians are more exotic or what. I mean, there are these perceptions, right, that make folks think that, Asians are, not of this place. Like we should go home. Like we don't belong here. Um, so yeah, it's and for those of us who, it's kind of like, well, what do you mean go home? This is
Right.
this is all I've
Oh,
ever known.
right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So now you got me going. So here is the $1 million question.
Hmm.
$1 million question is: do you see a path? How do we come together, minority communities who have seen each other as other? How do we bridge that?
It's so interesting, and I, you and I have talked about this before. That here in Boston, we have obviously affinity groups. The Asian Bar Association, the Black Bar Association, and I told you this story the other day where I'm like, we're always looking at the Massachusetts Black Lawyers Association. We're like, man, they've got it all together. They're so organized. They have such power. How can we be like them? And I actually did reach out to my friends over there, and I'm like, gosh, you guys are so good. We want to partner with you. And they and my friend looked at me and was like, oh my gosh, we're a mess. We thought you
Right.
guys were all together, and we should partner with you. So I agree. I think there's huge opportunity, and there's huge, it takes a little bit of doing, right? We need to People need to take the first step. I think sometimes we're so uh, busy trying to get our own houses in order because
Right.
we feel like we're not.
Right.
But I actually think that's the reason why, that's why I get so excited about the ERGs in our companies, because yeah, you have the different ERGs, but actually it's much easier in that corporate environment to bring them together,
Absolutely.
um, and then actually have some great learnings and listenings and kind of cross pollination. Um,
Yeah.
and so maybe it starts there, but at the end of the day, I think all of us just want to be heard, and we want to be, we want people to recognize that, we all come to this life with different perspectives, and you just want to be able to respect and appreciate what everybody brings.
Yeah, well, and what you just said, I'm still laughing to myself a little bit about the reaction of the Black Law uh, group having the reaction of, you admire us like we're a mess. It goes so core to how our self-esteem, like the self-esteem of our community. We
Yeah.
we we couldn't imagine that you would admire us, right? You admire, real, how could that be? You know what I mean? Like, that just speaks volumes. And I think that maybe the part of it or the start of it is like this conversation, right?
Mm.
How do we how do we reach out? How do we find the opportunity to do a thing, right? And then there's two things, and then maybe it's several things, and on we go. But I appreciate that story so much because I can just imagine. I can imagine their faces going, "What?"
Exactly.
And that's funny. So listen, this is a great conversation. We could go on, as we know,
For days.
And we know that we will, we will gather and go on, but just not in this forum. But I want to, I always close this conversation by asking really the same question, and that is, on inputs to action, we take the input of our guests, and then we ask our guests to give us some action to take, right? So that we really are taking, it really is input to action in the literal sense. So what can we do? What advice would you give us? And maybe it's in the context of being allies, but I'll leave it open. What advice would you give us now? What action can we take just to make this better, particularly in the context of Asian hate that we are experiencing, and to your point, that has been in existence for time?
Well, I think it's a little bit of what I was saying before. It's taking the time to listen and to learn. I mean, I have to learn more even about my own Asian American history, and I think it's for all of us. I think being thoughtful and being open and being willing to have conversations, I think that goes a really long way. And then I guess the other thing I would say, I guess with respect to Asian hate, but just generally, especially if you're not a person of color. I mean, allies have power, right? They have power, and you can use it. You can wield your power pretty easily by just speaking up. Like if you see something happening, say something. Don't let it just happen to this person, because I think sometimes people are just so shocked, or they don't feel like it's their place to say, "Hey, I don't think that was appropriate," or you shouldn't say that, or I think it would be helpful if people would just take a stand and speak up.
Yep. I mean, and we both know the power an ally can offer, because and we've seen it recently with the community at UNC standing up for professor. Her name is going to escape me, but she's headed to my alma mater.
Exactly.
Yep. And just that community saying, "Hey, this wasn't right," changes what perhaps that community does in offering tenure, or just how they'll treat professors going forward. So it matters, and there's a lot of power to be wielded there for sure. Peggy, this was great. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for just having the real and the candid conversation, because that really is how we're going to learn and how we're going to grow. I think we all got to dig into our history books and get more context around all that's happened in American history, so that we're really grounded on what we're looking at. I love that you called out that the whole idea of the model minority is a function of social oppression. I had not really thought of that, but that's makes this right. So thank you. So
it's been an honor, as always, Dr. Lisa.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You have been listening to Inputs to Action, and I thank you for joining me. Until next time.